Secrets have a way of consuming us. The deeper they are buried, the stronger their hold becomes. This is the story of how an obsession took control of my life, leading me down a path of secrecy, guilt, and ultimately, redemption. If you've ever found yourself drawn to something you knew was wrong but couldn't resist, then this story will resonate with you. It's about temptation, addiction, and the struggle to reclaim one's self-worth. It all started subtly. My wife and I had been married for a couple of years, and life was comfortable. But there was something about her mother, an elegance, a scent, a presence, that stirred something in me I couldn't quite understand. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, and despite never doing anything inappropriate, I felt an inexplicable attraction toward her. At first, I ignored it. I told myself it was just a passing thought, an intrusive idea that would fade with time. But the more time we spent at my in-laws' house, the more difficult it became to suppress the strange pull I felt. The scent of her perfume lingered in the air, and soon I found myself drawn to places she had been. It was a temptation that made no sense, yet it was all-consuming. I tried to shake it off, convinced that it was nothing more than my mind playing tricks on me. But the more I attempted to resist, the stronger the urge became. It felt like a shadow creeping over me, dark and inescapable. I began noticing things about her that I hadn't before. The way she moved, the way she laughed, the effortless way she carried herself. It wasn't just attraction, it was a fixation. One evening, while staying at my in-laws' house, I found myself alone near her room. I could smell her familiar perfume, mixed with a subtle scent of laundry detergent and something uniquely hers. My heart pounded as I hesitated outside the doorway, battling the war in my mind. I knew it was wrong, but the temptation felt unbearable. That night, I crossed a line I never thought I would. I stepped into her room and found myself searching for something, anything, that could bring me closer to the source of my obsession. When I found an article of her clothing, a surge of adrenaline and guilt hit me at the same time. I knew it was perverse, yet in that moment, it felt like I had no control. Each night we stayed over, the compulsion grew stronger. It was no longer just about the scent. It was about the rush, the secrecy, the thrill of doing something I knew was forbidden. The guilt would settle in immediately after, but by then, it was too late. My mind had been hijacked by an addiction I didn't fully understand. What started as a single moment of weakness turned into a compulsion. Every visit to my in-laws' house became an internal battle between restraint and indulgence. I would sneak into her space when no one was watching, taking in the scent that had inexplicably captivated me. Each time, I promised myself it would be the last. Each time, I failed. The secrecy was thrilling yet suffocating. I felt trapped in my own mind, constantly haunted by the weight of my actions. I convinced myself that as long as no one found out, it wasn't harming anyone. But deep down, I knew I was betraying my own sense of integrity. My addiction seeped into other aspects of my life. I became paranoid, always looking over my shoulder. I began having nightmares, dreams where I was caught, shamed, and ostracized. The stress began affecting my health. I lost weight, suffered from constant anxiety, and withdrew from my wife emotionally. She noticed the changes, but I refused to admit what was truly wrong. Guilt has a way of manifesting itself in unexpected ways. My obsession began affecting my marriage. I became distant from my wife, distracted and emotionally unavailable. She noticed a shift but had no idea what was causing it. One evening, my worst fear came true. I had been careless. My wife walked in on me as I stood in her mother's room, caught in the act. The look on her face was one of confusion, then horror, then heartbreak. My secret had been exposed in the worst way possible. There were no words that could justify what I had done. The confrontation that followed was one of the most painful experiences of my life. My wife was devastated, unable to comprehend why I would betray her in such a way. My mother-in-law, upon hearing what had happened, was mortified and refused to speak to me. The aftermath was brutal. My wife left me, unable to look at me the same way again. My in-laws cut me out completely, and I found myself alone, drowning in my own shame. I had allowed an obsession to destroy everything I had built. For months, I spiraled. I avoided people, buried myself in distractions, and refused to acknowledge the depth of my problem. But no matter how much I tried to escape, the reality was inescapable. I had to face the truth. I needed help. Healing wasn't immediate. I started therapy, confronting the root of my compulsions and understanding why I had allowed myself to fall into such a destructive pattern. It was painful to admit my own weaknesses, but it was necessary. Through therapy, I learned about impulse control, addiction, and the psychological factors that had contributed to my behavior. More importantly, I learned that true redemption comes from acknowledging one's mistakes and actively working to change. Over time, I rebuilt my life. I immersed myself in self-improvement, deep reflection, and healthier coping mechanisms. I learned to redirect my thoughts, to recognize the dangers of unchecked obsession, and to respect the boundaries that should never be crossed. My marriage did not survive, but I became a better person through the lessons I learned. I hope that by sharing my story, others who struggle with compulsions can see that there's a way out, a way to break free from destructive habits and reclaim control of their lives.